Joining us right now on the phones, U.S. Senator John Cornyn. Sir, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good morning, Chad. It's good to be back with you. I'm doing great.
Great. Appreciate it. The Senate has been in the spotlight early this week because of the death of Justice Scalia. First, I want you to go ahead and give some thoughts on Justice Scalia and how he shaped the Supreme Court, and then also what the U.S. Senate, in your mind, should do when it comes to a possible replacement.
Well, Chad, I met Justice Scalia when I was sworn into the Texas Supreme Court in 1991, right after the 1990 election. He came down to Austin and swore in the new court. And so I've known him off and on over the years. I had a chance later in life to go bird hunting with him. And found him just to be an amazing individual, full of life. He lived all 79 of his years to the fullest. And as for his mark on the Supreme Court, I think he'll go down as one of the most influential judges on the Supreme Court in the last, certainly since World War II. So it's a big loss, and my wife and I, Sandy, are going to attend the funeral on Saturday in Virginia. But the Constitution says that the president shall nominate judges, but it also says that the Senate provides advice and consent. In other words, the Senate confirms judges. So the president is taking the position that he's going to nominate someone. He has the authority to do that, but the Senate also has the authority to say this is just too important to the future of the country and to the future of the Supreme Court to do this now as a lame duck president, Obama. Let's let this election be a referendum on who gets to make that selection, which I think raises the stakes considerably in this presidential race.
Visiting with U.S. Senator John Cornyn, while it seems as though most of the Republican senators are on board with saying no to a confirmation, there are still some Republicans who have not ruled out at least a committee hearing on the nominee, correct? And that would include yourself?
Well, I don't see the point of having a committee hearing if we're not going to vote on the nomination. It really sort of, I think, raises expectations. It raises false hope. I saw some of those stories that suggested that I was open to that, but I don't really see the point. I think part of the confusion is people are dispersed all over the country now because the Senate's on a break, and I'm traveling the state of Texas, and so we'll be meeting when we return to Washington on Monday. Actually, the Judiciary Committee is getting together, I believe, on Wednesday to talk about the path forward. But it strikes me that we're, by and large, on the same page in saying that there should be no one to fill that seat until the next election. The Supreme Court can function just fine in the vast majority of cases with 8 members. It does that occasionally when individual members are recused. So that's my position, is that there should be no one appointed or confirmed to that seat until the next president is selected.
And so you don't see a point in even taking it, I guess, to the first step, which would be, or maybe I guess the second step, which would be the committee hearing.
That's correct. And, Chad, I would just point out that Chuck Schumer, who's going to be the next Democratic leader when Harry Reid retires at the end of this year, took a similar position in 2007 when he said 18 months before George W. Bush's term ended that the Democrats shouldn't confirm, or at least he said there should be a presumption against confirmation for any Bush nominees to the Supreme Court. That was 18 months before the end of President Bush's term. So I believe we ought to apply what I call the Schumer precedent here as well, and to the same with the same outcome. No confirmation this year.
It was the idea was floated that the president, if the Senate went into recess, the president could appoint someone that way, a recess appointment.
That's right.
Tell our listeners about how that would work if and when the Senate goes into recess, because there are some technical things there.
Yeah, it is pretty technical, but that provision of the Constitution was written for a time when literally Congress wasn't in session very much to allow the president to make so-called recess appointments. But now the Supreme Court has circumscribed that in a really dramatic sort of way. So as long as the Senate's not out of session more than 10 days, the president really can't do that. And there is a way that certainly Majority Leader McConnell is well aware of for the Senate to gavel in every few days in a so-called pro forma session to essentially deny the president that opportunity. So I don't think that's a realistic likelihood under these circumstances.
Some in the media are already saying that this is a risky move for the Republicans, that this could have implications on 2016. It could hurt some of the down ballot races that are out there. I don't buy that. But what is the pressure like? Do you think there's going to be just a ton of pressure from voters out there to I guess, force you guys to confirm whoever the president puts up?
Well, I don't think we'll feel the pressure from certainly my constituents in Texas, right. And I think it's likely you're going to see it from the New York Times and the Washington Post and the allies of this administration. But that's okay. I mean, that goes with the territory. That's what that's what the job entails. We've drawn the line in the sand and said it's not going to happen, and we just need to hold that position. And I'm confident we can. I do think that this raises the stakes for the presidential election because of the contentious primaries on both sides. I think people have it's been sort of an interesting and sometimes puzzling primary season. But I think what this does is it raises the stakes for this next election and makes it clear that we need to win this election because we need the next president to be a Republican president to make this appointment. Because I think many people are so disturbed these days, Chad, because they just don't recognize their country anymore because of some of the decisions that the Supreme Court's made that aren't really based on any constitution, but more on value judgments. And then a president like President Obama that just seems to be untethered and unconstrained by the Constitution and laws that are passed by Congress. So I think this is going to be a really important election for all sorts of reasons, and this just raises the stakes even more.
When people are looking at the candidates, and obviously we're in early voting here in Texas, and they're trying to decide who they like the most. You got the national frontrunner, which is Donald Trump. You've got Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, all in that top tier of candidates. When it comes to the Supreme Court, what should voters look at when it comes to these Republican candidates?
Well, I think they hopefully will look at who has an appreciation for the appropriate role of judges in our system of government, and who will not appoint an activist judge who basically believes that you can make up the law as you go along. As you know, Chad, I served for 13 years as a district judge and on the Texas Supreme Court. I have pretty well-formed views of what those judges ought to be like, and I've tried hard to stay out of the presidential primaries, but I think that's something people ought to look at and ask themselves, what kind of judges would this person appoint, and who can win? I know sometimes people say you really shouldn't focus so much on who can win, but the point is in politics that if you come in second, the other person gets to make those choices and gets to govern. So I think electability is very important, and somebody who has a conservative philosophy on who they ought to nominate to the Supreme Court are the two things I would look at the most. Before
I let you go, I have to ask the question, have you decided who you want to be the next president of the United States?
I have not. I've sort of kept my eye on my job in the Senate. That keeps me pretty busy. And I know it's kind of entertaining and somewhat distracting. And some people have told me as I've traveled the state, they're a little disturbed by all of the infighting in the primaries. But I don't see that as ultimately destructive of our ability to nominate somebody who can win. I think you look at the Democratic primary, and Hillary Clinton is in big trouble. 92% of the people in the exit polls in New Hampshire said she wasn't trustworthy. And a self-described Democratic socialist, Bernie Sanders, beat her. So I think there's just a lot of turmoil because I think our country is truly unsettled. And I give a lot of blame to President Obama for his creating so much uncertainty, both economic and from a national security perspective, right, on the future. And so I think it's an important election, and I just would encourage everybody to get out and vote. Early voting, as you point out, I'm going to vote today. It's already started, And then, of course, the primary, in-person primary is March the 1st. So everybody get out and vote.
U.S. Senator John Cornyn, as always, appreciate your time.
Thanks, Chad.
Have a good one. That's U.S. Senator John Cornyn here on the Chad Hasty Show.